Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Columbia Climate School in the Green Mountains informational session for summer 2026. My name is Laurel Zaimashihi, and I'm the Assistant Director of K-12 and Continuing Education at the Columbia Climate School. I also have a background in marine and sustainability science, and I'm one of the instructors in the Green Mountains program. So we are hosting these information sessions about the Green Mountains program on the third Thursday of every month from November through March from 4 to 5 p.m. And each session, we're going to spotlight a different aspect of the program. We have this session, we have two of our amazing 7 Columbia experts that are going to be teaching on the program, and the experts will introduce a topic or a few topics of the lessons that they will be teaching to give the students a preview of what they can expect. And we're also joined by a program alumna who will offer firsthand about her experience in the program, a little bit more about her climate action project, which is something that you can get excited about building yourself. It's the final deliverable of the program that allows students to bring back a climate solution to their own communities at the end. So I would like to briefly introduce our speakers here today and allow them to share a little bit more about themselves and their climate story. So first, Aisosa Obadiaru, who is our 2025 alumna.
Hi everyone, my name is Aisosa Obadiaru. I'm currently a senior at United Charter Advanced Math and Science 2, and I learned about this program through my school, who has been sponsoring students to come here. And climate change is always something we touched on a little, but we never fully expanded on. So this program was a perfect opportunity to grow on my knowledge about climate change and see how it affects me living in New York City.
Thank you so much. And on the Columbia side, we're joined by Aandishah Samara.
Hi, my name is Aandishah, and I am a fourth year PhD student in the Earth and Environmental Science department. I work a lot on droughts and floods. Basically, I try to understand how different modes of dryness and wetness have changed over time, looking at the most recent 120 years.
Amazing. Thank you, Aandishah. Also from Columbia, we have Alex Parsells.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm also in the same PhD program as Aandishah, same year actually. But yeah, I work on tropical rainfall and how it relates to atmospheric energy flux. And so, the atmosphere has this requirement to transport energy from the tropics towards the poles, and I'm interested in understanding how precipitation is involved in that. And I'll also say I only got into climate science after my undergrad. I used to study astrophysics, and then just sort of jumped into it in grad school because I was interested in the human implications. But that's me.
Thanks so much, Alex. Don't worry, you're going to hear from them more later. Next is Emma, also from the Columbia Climate School.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Kizavat. I am the graduate student program assistant working with Laurel in the Green Mountain program within the K-12 and continuing ed department at the Climate School. I'm also currently a graduate student at the Climate School pursuing a Master's of Arts in Climate and Society. And I come from a background in environmental and outdoor education. I worked in San Francisco as a garden educator and then worked with public school teachers in the Bay Area to implement climate and sustainability in their curriculum. So really excited to be continuing this work with our Green Mountains program.
Thanks, Emma. And last but not least, Sylvie Littledale from Putney Student Travel.
Thanks, Laurel. Hey, everyone. My name is Sylvie. I work at Mountains Student Travel, as Laurel said. I'll tell you a little bit more about who we are in a little bit, but at Putney, I am the Putney Side Program Director for the Columbia Climate School and the Green Mountains program. Here at Putney Student Travel, I design experiential education programs for high school and middle school students. I work primarily in Peru, China, and this program in Vermont. I'm also a member of our leader hiring team, so I get to work with the leaders who join you all during the summer, which is a great part of my job. I particularly love working on the Climate School in the Green Mountains program because I'm a native Vermonter as well. I live and work here. I have my whole life. And I've just grown up enjoying all of the natural resources that Vermont has to offer. And so these topics are really important to me. And I am excited to welcome you all to the beautiful state of Vermont to dive into these topics further. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sylvie. As far as our agenda goes, we're going to start with a brief overview of Columbia Climate School and Putney Student Travel. Then we're going to take a deep dive into the Columbia Climate School and the Green Mountains program. So we're going to give you details about the program themes, teaching approaches, and you will hear from Aandishah and Alex about a preview of some of the lessons that you'll be getting on the program. Then we're going to glimpse into a day in the life of a Green Mountain student and share the highlights of that experience. And we're going to conclude by sharing about program eligibility and the application process and next steps that you can take to join us this summer. Please keep in mind we do have a Q&A box that is enabled. So if you have any questions at any moment, you can populate the Q&A box with those. The chat is disabled, and at the end, we will stop the recording and allow you even the opportunity to ask us questions live if you are so inclined. So we will have plenty of time for that. All right, so about the climate school, we are the newest school at Columbia University. The first new school in over 25 years, and we're the first school of its kind in the United States. So we were announced in 2020, and we're dedicated to advancing interdisciplinary climate research and education with a strong focus on outreach, impact, and partnerships to meet the growing need for solutions to the climate crisis. For this program, interdisciplinarity is really the heart of the Green Mountains program and really everything that we do at Columbia Climate School. We recognize that climate change is this really complex and wicked problem. It impacts us across every sector, across every part of our lives. And so to address this really complex challenge, we need creative solutions that work collaboratively across disciplines. So that's why interdisciplinarity is really the key here. And we weave that into our curriculum. We recognize that students, they want to be a part of the climate solution, but we don't need all students to be climate scientists. We need them to bring these climate solutions into whatever career path they're interested in pursuing. So in our curriculum, we make sure that we are learning about climate through and across multiple disciplines so they can understand the complexity of the challenge and also explore innovative solutions. We want to make sure that we're thinking about this as a system because it is. We also have interdisciplinarity in our climate school experts and faculty that join the program. So our educators have a diverse variety of backgrounds that they're bringing. Some are climate scientists and modelers. Some are lawyers and policy analysts. Some are social scientists and communication experts. Some are business professionals and financial experts. We have a whole wide variety of expertise that we're bringing to the program to help your students envision themselves in these career paths. And finally, we have a very interdisciplinary student body. We have students that attend the program from across the United States and the world, and they're bringing these unique perspectives and experiences and talents to the program. So you are going to be in good company with like-minded peers that are also really inspired to bring climate solutions to the forefront. And through a partnership with Putney Student Travel, we've been able to offer this incredible program where we can have students get hands-on in this very immersive summer experience. So I'm going to hand it over to Sylvie now to share a little bit more about Putney and their mission and goals.
Thank you, Laurel. So as we've been talking about, Putney Student Travel is an organization that runs educational travel programs for middle and high school students all over the world. We were founded in 1951, and since then we've been creating opportunities for students to learn, grow, collaborate, and embrace the unfamiliar, always with safety at the center. This is our 75th year, and we've been a family-run organization since the beginning. We're now in our third generation of leadership. Putney Student Travel was founded by the two people you see here. It was founded in 1951 by George and Kitty Shumlin. They were two teachers who believed in the power of bringing young people together, particularly in a post-war world that seemed to be increasingly marked by growing division. Their first program, they brought U.S. high school students to Europe by steamship and fostered an opportunity for them to build understanding through real face-to-face connection. That mission, helping students step out of their comfort zone and find common ground across lines of difference, that's really what still guides us today and feels increasingly more important now. We believe summer is the ideal time for that meaningful education to happen. All of our programs encourage students to deeply connect with the world through immersion and experiential learning. We offer both small group travel programs, so about 16 students with 2 leaders, as well as larger campus-based programs like this one. So this is our barn. We call it the barn. It's a restored cow barn. This is where our team of about 25 colleagues work. It's where I am right now. You can see the restored beams here. So our team is comprised of program directors who are former Peace Corps volunteers, teachers, anthropologists, many other backgrounds, each bringing expertise and lived experience and language skills to each of the programs that we create. So when families call us, they connect directly with the program director who curates the trip that they're interested in. We're on call 24/7 during the summer, supporting our leaders and students with whatever is needed. For the climate school program, we are really thrilled to collaborate with Columbia to support young, passionate voices and spark meaningful dialogue and action around solutions to a changing climate. The way that you'll see us participating is a lot of the back end backbone of the program, just to make sure that everything is set in terms of accommodations and food and all of the structure needed to deliver the curriculum that the climate school brings to the table. We also provide a team of residential staff to the program that you'll be with throughout the summer. Thanks. I'll turn it back over to Laurel.
Thanks, Sylvie. So, the Columbia Climate School in the Green Mountains is hosted on Vermont State University's picturesque 165-acre campus. As Sylvie said, this is a campus-based program, but we are able to go on excursions and explore the local area through a place-based educational lens. With a foundation in STEM, our pre-college program shows how climate science, earth processes, and sustainability can be integrated into any career path. Students can anticipate to gain knowledge, skills, and tools to identify their own climate pathway and make meaningful contributions to their communities. So the program is in its sixth summer this upcoming year. The dates are July 5th through July 17th. So it's a 13-day, 12-night program. The fee is $7,290, and that's an all-inclusive fee that covers your accommodation, all of your meals, program activities, field excursions, and weekend trips, and transportation during the program. And this is a pre-college program designed for students grades 9th through 12th. We also accept motivated rising 9th grade students. Now I want to invite Aisosa to join us. I would love to hear about the program through your eyes, hear a little bit more about the student experience.
Of course. So I can go through all my pictures. So first we have my biome, the marine biome, the best biome there is. Then we have Lake Bomoseen. Memories there are so fun. Anything Lake Bomoseen, I love. We used to play volleyball there. We used to test water. We used to watch the sunsets, have barbecues. It was amazing. Next, we have the food truck system to Shelbourne Farms, where I milked a cow for the first time. So that was really cool. Next, we have tree coring, me and my friends doing their climate action project. Then more tree coring. We were analyzing the data that we collected. Next is my biome. Again, the next two pictures of us celebrating someone's birthday and also a web of appreciation that we did at the end of the program. And then we have a little calf, Lavender from the Shelburne Farms. Me and my friend Sam, we were looking at little critters in the water. And finally, me with my climate action project.
Thank you so much, Aisosa. I feel like these pictures, they really do tell a story. We are learning, but we're also having a lot of fun and exploring the beauty of Vermont over the summer, which is the best.
Definitely.
So, there's so much going on for students over the summer. How did you learn about the Green Mountains program, and what really drew you to this program?
So my school has been offering us scholarships to go to this program. So it's like a whole thing. They announce it during advisory. And at first I'm like, climate change. What do I know about climate change? And that's what hit me. What do I know about climate change? I don't know anything about climate change. My school touches on it, but doesn't really go in depth. So this was definitely an area in science that I knew little about, and I really wanted to immerse myself over the summer. So I learned more about it. One thing I learned was the urban heat island effect, which affects me because I live in New York City. And I'll get into it a little more later in my climate action project, exactly what that effect is. But definitely this program helped me learn about it. And yeah, just climate change was not a subject I was familiar on, and I really wanted to be knowledgeable in that.
That's amazing and not too uncommon. I think, our standards for what we teach in the classroom varies state by state in the US and also globally. And so not everyone is teaching or, has to teach climate. And so we're all starting our climate journey at different points. But if your motivation is to bring solutions back home, then this is a great program for you to start to think about how you can do that and become a leader in your community. So I'm glad that you were able to join us. So what were some of your favorite activities and lessons, both academic but also not academic, some of the fun activities that we had on the program?
So I think the interactive activity that we have that was in like the Model UN type concept, it was about like climate negotiations on how we can collectively bring down the amount of temperature increase of the global temperature increase. And I remember I was part of the India's representatives, and we were just talking with other countries, developing countries, China, about how like compromises that we can do. We were talking to lobbyists and activist, which I think was really fun because not only did it show me climate change, but it showed me like the policy and political side of climate change as well. And for non-academic, anytime we went to Lake Bomoseen was fun.
It is my favorite place. It's so beautiful. I mean, this picture shows it. It's just stunning. And yeah, I think that climate climate conference simulation, it's basically every student is representing a country or an interest block, and we are recreating a COP conference or conference of the parties. Happens every year where countries do have to negotiate, as you said, to try and stay below 2, ideally 1.5 degrees C of warming. And it's challenging, right? I mean,
Yes.
it puts a lot of perspective on why it's hard to get there, but every year I feel like that's one of my favorite activities too. And I know we did a whole lot, we learned a lot on the program, but what were some of the things that stuck out with you a year later that you have learned or gained from the program?
So definitely why it takes longer to implement climate change policies and how I can take what I learn and apply it to everyday scenarios with like the administration that's going on. And it just really showed me the importance of climate change. And like I said earlier, urban heat island effect and what we can do to prevent that from happening because a lot of us live in major cities and we are experiencing higher heat than urban areas around us. And it just goes to a whole problem. So I feel like that definitely stuck out with me and stuck with me till today.
That's great. And we're going to bring you back to share more about your climate action project, share more about the urban heat island effects. So don't worry, we're going to bring Aisosa back. But thank you so much for sharing a little more about the program.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to hand it over to Emma.
Awesome. Thank you, Aisosa, for sharing all of your insights in those wonderful pictures. So moving on, I wanted to highlight some of our program themes. As a pre-college program of the Columbia Climate School, we do put a strong emphasis on academics, and each summer the program content can shift a little based on feedback. These are our program themes for this summer. These are all listed on our website and have some more detail there as well, so I definitely encourage you to go onto the website after to see more about these themes. But to highlight a couple, as Aisosa mentioned, we talk a lot about international climate policies and negotiations, think through global frameworks. We also talk about climate impacts at the global scale, at the local scale, and that really intersects with climate justice and how climate change is disproportionately impacting marginalized communities in the US and globally. And then to name, I think one more really popular one is sustainability in the circular economy. So we talk about, fast fashion, throwaway culture, and how to really build a sustainable business within a circular economy. And then lastly, I'll mention the climate change communications and conversation, another popular one, where students really learn how to engage in conversations about climate change and climate solutions with a diverse audience, and how to have dialogue about climate issues. So these are just a couple key ones, but definitely encourage you to look more at this list and on our website to find out more about our program themes. And within the Green Mountains program, we have 7 Columbia Climate School experts that lead lessons and activities, as Laurel mentioned earlier. And many of these experts are also graduate and undergraduate professors at Columbia. So today, as you already have seen, we have 2 of our Columbia Climate School experts who will be joining us this summer, Aandishah and Alex, currently pursuing their PhDs in Earth and Environmental Science. So thank you both so much for joining us. We're really excited to hear a little snapshot of what you'll be teaching this summer. So I'll pass it over to you both.
Awesome. Hi, thank you for that. So Alex and I will be teaching these three lessons during the program, and we just wanted to give you an overview of the three programs. We'll start by talking about the science of climate change, then we'll be addressing climate modeling, and then lastly about the climate change in your community. Next slide. So I grew up in Bangladesh, which is a really warm and tropical and humid country where the weather stays relatively the same throughout the year. However, since I've moved to the Northeast, what I realized is that we actually have to check the weather every day to make sure that we can dress appropriately. So when we wake up in the morning and we're looking at the weather to see the temperatures and dress accordingly, that is weather. Next slide. So when you look at that weather across a long period of time and you average it over a month or a season, that is typically what the climate of the region looks like. So you have different temperatures, you have a different amount of precipitation and rainfall that accrues over this region. So that is climate. And with climate change, what we're seeing is that seasonality that we're used to, what we expect, for example, here, if you look in this figure, these lighter blue colors show you what the climatology of this region looked like in the 1800s. And you can see that climatology has since then started to change. This change in this climatology over the long period is what we consider climate change. What other evidence of this do we have? So this figure on one side with the red dot and that blue line down the middle is what's known famously as the Keeling curve. The Keeling curve is basically an accumulation of CO2 measurements in Hawaii, and it's an observatory that it's the longest consistent measurement of CO2 that we have, and they've been running since 1958. And one of the things that you see on the figure is that you see this sawtooth figure, so you see the up and down. And if you zoom into that, you see that there is a high and a low that happens over each year. So that's your seasonal variation. However, what you also see is this really long, sharp turn. So you see this upward positive trend. And that's what we're considering climate change. And it's one of the biggest evidences that we have to show that the CO2 levels rising is impacting climate. And on the other side, the figure that you see is when we stretch back our CO2 measurements using different things that we're going to be talking about in our lessons, such as proxies, such as ice cores and other measurements, we see that even if you go back all the way to the past 800,000 years, the CO2 levels that we have in the last couple of decades are some of the highest we've ever had. Next slide.
So, okay, Aandishah talked about CO2, right? And I think a lot of you guys probably are aware that CO2 is the dominant reason why we're experiencing the global warming that we are. But what does it look like on spatial scales? So this is kind of an interesting video that I think illustrates that nicely. This is from NASA. Oh, whoops. I was hoping it would loop, but I guess it doesn't. But thanks. Yeah, so as you watch this, right, you can see this is a temperature anomaly relative to a fixed period in the 1950s through 80s. You can see as the colors are going from blue to orange, right, the whole globe is getting warmer, but it's not at a uniform rate. And as we get into the later period here, you can see the Arctic especially is warming more than the rest of the globe, right? And so we call this Arctic amplification. Why does that happen though, right? I mean, why is there differential warming? Why isn't it just a uniform signal? So these are some of the questions that we're going to talk about in this program over the summer, and we're going to use the idea of climate forcings and feedbacks to understand that a little bit better. Okay, so you could go to the next slide. So, okay, we know about the signal of CO2 on temperature, right? And then the question is, what else does it affect? I mean, you may have heard people who are climate skeptics say things like, well, why should I care that it's getting a couple degrees warmer? I like the warm weather. But of course, that's not the whole story. And you guys might know that climate change shows up in a lot of other parts of the Earth system. I mean, Laurel mentioned talking about Earth as a system, and it really is a system, right? So you could see effects in other areas too, things that might not be obvious at first glance, like sea level rise. So this plot on the left is a graph of the global mean sea level coming from NASA over the last 30 years or so. You can just focus on this black line in the middle of the plot, and you can see that over the last 30 or so years, sea level has increased globally on average by about 12 centimeters, which Might not sound like a lot, but we have cities, mostly along the coast, cities that are at sea level, sometimes even below sea level. That can make a big difference. And when you put 12 extra centimeters on top of the storm surge from a hurricane, for example, that can really determine, what property gets destroyed and what property doesn't. Um, Another interesting way you can see the climate change signal is in sea ice, right? So on the right-hand side here, this is Arctic sea ice volume. Um, and this animation is showing it over the course of the year going around the circle, and then also from year to year as the lines continue to spiral inward. And so you can see the total volume of Arctic sea ice is decreasing over time. And it's not necessarily decreasing at the same rate in summer as it is in fall or in winter. So why is that, right? How do we understand that? Um, and so you could go to the next slide. This is sort of tying into this idea that, I hope we'll be able to communicate to you guys this summer that when it comes to climate and climate change, everything is connected, right? Earth is made up of, this is sort of a common way of communicating that idea. You talk about Earth as being made up of different spheres, right? So there's five of them here. There's the atmosphere, right? So, I mean, this is all the air that's above the land and the water. This is where we're emitting CO2 into, right? Which in many ways is sort of the driver of much of the climate change that's going on today. There's also the hydrosphere. This is the ocean and also all the rest of the water that's on land, even the water vapor in the atmosphere, which has a big impact on where it rains, and thus on people's livelihoods. There's the cryosphere, right? There's a ton of ice. I mean, we don't necessarily see it all the time because most of us are not living in the Arctic or the Antarctic, but it actually has a pretty outsized impact on the climate that we feel. The biosphere, right? How does all this inorganic stuff interact with living matter, right? Like trees or like algae, which are continually taking up CO2 and emitting oxygen, or in the case of people doing the opposite, right? And then the geosphere, right? So we have all these rocks and soil on the land surface. How does that interact with the climate? On long time scales, there's something called the silicate weathering feedback, which is what removes CO2 from the atmosphere over the time scale of millions of years. But on short time scales, things like soil moisture are really important for the climate. And so, what I hope you're starting to understand, if you didn't already, is that when it comes to climate, everything is connected and these spheres interact in different ways. You could go to the next slide. And so one of the really interesting ways that these spheres can interact is, they can interact in complex and maybe nonlinear ways. So this is a map of possible tipping points in the climate system. And what that means is elements of the Earth system that might respond non-linearly to an increase in temperature. And what I mean by that is, say we increase the temperature by 1 degree, right? We see some set of effects around the globe. What if we increase it another degree? Is the change the same as it was from 0 to 1 degree, or does it look different from 1 to 2 degrees? And if it looks different, then that's where you can get some really interesting behavior. And this is stuff that can sometimes be scary because we're talking about, um, you know, I mean, look at a few of these tipping points that are on here, right? I mean, a collapse of boreal permafrost or a collapse of convection in the Labrador Erminger Seas, which is actually like the engine of the global deep ocean circulation. Will the West Antarctic ice sheet collapse down on the bottom left here? Will the East Antarctic ice sheet start to go? So, this is one of the really interesting things in climate science is these different spheres of the climate are interacting in ways, some of which we are aware of and some of which we haven't discovered yet. And so we can use climate models to try to understand them better. And so that kind of leads us into the climate modeling part of what we're going to talk about this summer, right? So, given that the climate is such a complex system, and yet it has such enormous impacts on human life, how do we make predictions of it? I mean, how do we possibly simulate this? And so we'll talk a little bit about what climate models are and how they work. And this is just sort of a teaser, to get you interested. But I mean, there's a ton of different processes going on in the Earth system. I mean, you have solar radiation, which is driving it all, right? But then you have the land, you have the ocean, you have winds in the atmosphere, you have atmospheric chemistry going on, which actually has a bigger impact than you might think. There's human emissions, right, which we have to include. There's carbon cycling going from the land to the ocean and dynamic vegetation where forests are moving poleward or equatorward. And all these things interact. And so how do we build this into a climate model? And you could go to the next slide. And then once we do build a climate model, what can we do with it, right? I mean, so this is a famous figure from the IPCC report. If you're not familiar with the IPCC, it's basically an intergovernmental organization that makes periodic reports on the status of climate change, what we observe and what we know about it. And they make some really beautiful figures and do really thorough reports. So they're a great resource if you want to learn more about this. But this is a really nice figure that shows how we know that it's humans that are causing most of the climate change that we see today. And so this is over the historical period from 1850 to 2020, right? What do you get if you take a climate model and compare it to observations, right? So the black line here is the observed global mean temperature increase. And you can see it's relatively flat in the first few decades and that it really spikes up in the last few decades. Um, and you might ask, are we the reason for this? Is CO2 emission and methane emission by humans the reason for this? And so you can run a climate model with only the natural forcing. So, for example, just changes in solar activity, which affects the amount of radiation coming into Earth, and also volcanoes, which also affect the amount of radiation coming into Earth. And you can see that when you run a model with just those factors, you can't reproduce the observed temperature trend. On the other hand, when you include our own activities of burning fossil fuels and putting aerosols into the system, you get something that looks very much like what we observe. And so this is a really nice way of knowing that it's humans that are causing most of the observed climate change. Um, you could go to the next slide. And so once we do have some trust in our models, right? I mean, once we know that we can use them for at least basic attribution studies like that, what can we do with them, right? How do we predict the future? Because, I mean, if you think about climate change, what we really want to know is what's the future going to look like? Because we want to be able to plan for it. And we also want to know how much we need to do to mitigate the effects of climate change. And so going from the historical period where this black line breaks now into projections of future global mean surface temperature, you can see these different colored lines represent different scenarios. And so there's a pretty wide range between the scenarios. And importantly, these scenarios are not representing different scenarios in the climate system itself. These are scenarios in what humans will do. In other words, things like how much carbon dioxide we're going to continue to emit into the system. And you can see each of these lines has a little spread on it. There's uncertainty on each of these lines, but the dominant uncertainty in how hot it's going to get by 2100 is coming not from things that we know or don't know about the climate system, but from uncertainties in what we're going to do and what the choices that we make are going to be as we continue to develop and try to mitigate our impact. And so I think that that's kind of scary in a way, but also hopeful because it means that we do have some agency to change the future, right? I mean, we can work to move our trajectory from one of these high emission scenarios to a lower one. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Aandishah.
Thanks, Alex. And so, with all of the things that we've talked about the evidence of climate science and how models can help us understand, one of the things that we should be aware of is that it doesn't feel fine. It feels scary. There's climate anxiety, there's concern, but which is why it's really important to like take back the power and work within our communities to understand how we can be helpful in climate change. Next slide. And one of the things that really helps us understand this is that despite the scientific evidence that we have about climate science and climate change and the evidence we have from like the Keeling curve and from the climate modeling, the perception of how climate change is impacted really does depend. So if you look at this one figure on the left-hand side, you can see that the threat that is felt by people about can vary by race. So different ethnicities, different regions can feel differently about how climate change can impact them or how they feel it'll harm them. And this can be difficult, right? So many potential scientists are often turned off by the prospect that climate science or sciences can act without any of these values. And it feels like you're approaching climate science or nature from this remote, dispassionate perspective. Personally, I've definitely felt that growing up in a country where climate change was real, a lot of people were still skeptical of climate science. When you have climate science as a hard science, it sometimes feels that it's not obviously relevant to our daily lives, or it doesn't really satisfactorily meet our needs. So these feelings can be especially salient for minority scholars who feel like we have a responsibility to give back to our communities. As we can see on this figure that you're looking on the whole map, a lot of places where we know climate change is incredibly vulnerable, we don't really have a lot of data on. And then some of the regions that we know have actually impacted a lot of the CO2 emissions don't have a stronger opinion of a strong belief in climate change the way that some other global south countries do. Next slide. And this can also impact not just our belief in climate science and climate change, but also in our climate action. So when we look at this figure also, you can see that there is a disparity across different race and also regions about what we should do with climate action. So some people believe that we should wait until we're fully sure. But a lot of the evidence that we found over the last 60, 70 years does show us that climate change is real. Yet our belief and perception of what that is, if it's a serious issue, what we should be doing about it, still remains. It feels like a dual option. Like some people agree, some people disagree. And there are all these other projects that have been happening on local communities that kind of try to bring that more broad scope down to a single point. And some of the projects that have happened for years. One of the projects that has been really big and has come back in the last couple of years is the Green New Deal. So the Green New Deal was actually a project that was started by President Roosevelt back in 1930s. And it was a direct result of the Great Depression and everything that happened that really enhanced our ideas of what climate change and our environment means for our community and our well-being. And while it has kind of died down in the last couple of years, we've seen a resurgence of it since the 2010s. There are also other coalitions that do very similar things that talk about climate solutions that we can do within the community. While the Green New Deal is more about creating infrastructure and creating architecture and resilience within communities, we also have things like the Blue New Deal. So the Blue New Deal basically talks about climate solutions, but for the seacoast. For example, one of the things that Alex talked about was sea level rise. And with sea level rise and sea ice declines, we're really impacting a lot of coastal communities. And so the Blue New Deal talks about having climate solutions that talk about our coastal resilience and communities. Then we also have the Red Deal, which is basically having indigenous and local action and collective grassroots movements to make sure that we are able to cater to our local communities. And the Climate Mayors is also another bipartisan program that has over 350 mayors from across 48 states in the United States that have come together to basically create climate solutions for the country.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aandishah and Alex, for giving that wonderful kind of preview of what a lesson might look like this summer in the Green Mountains program. So really quickly, as you can see from their example lesson, we will be leveraging a variety of different learning modalities and educational activities throughout the program. So we bring in speakers from the local community to talk to students. We have a lot of team building and networking opportunities. A lot of the educational activities and lessons are field-based and place-based. So we're out in Vermont, out in nature, in the water, taking samples of the water, seeing fish, taking tree core samples. So really place-based and hands-on. We also do excursions off campus, allowing students to meet practitioners that are applying climate solutions in the real world, in their careers. And then, as I mentioned, a lot of hands-on field work where students also get experience with data collection and analysis. So it's a little bit of kind of like a snippet or a day in the life of what it's like to be a biologist or a climatologist, an earth scientist, etc. And then finally, as we'll hear more a little bit later in this presentation from Aisosa, but we're going to also have students create their own climate action project throughout the program. So at the end of each summer, students will be able to present on their climate solution that they have worked on throughout the 2 weeks. And this is really a time for students to become empowered to become leaders in their own community. So they create a climate solution that's local to their community and they bring it back to implement. So that's kind of the capstone of the summer, and they share that project with the entire cohort as well as all the experts.
Thanks, Emma. Now we wanted to share a few of the highlights of the place-based and field-based experiential learning that happens over the program. So first, students are going to explore the ecosystems right here on campus. We conduct a macroinvertebrate survey in a local stream to assess water quality. Macroinvertebrates are these tiny little water bugs. Many of these insects are creatures that you may be familiar with, like a dragonfly, a mayfly, but you may not know that they actually start their life in water as these little aquatic bugs that have a varying degree of sensitivity to water quality issues. So if we are finding a lot of diversity with a lot of different species that are particularly sensitive to water quality issues, then we can use this as a proxy to infer that this is a pretty good, healthy stream. And vice versa. If we don't have a lot of diversity and we only get the really hardy worms, then we can use that method to come to a conclusion that this stream might not be as healthy for biodiversity. And so this is actually a protocol that's used all over the United States with community scientists to understand water quality health. We're then going to collect a proxy, a climate proxy on campus, which is a tree ring. So you may know that tree rings offer a window into past climate. Every year, a tree grows one ring, and the width of that ring can reflect the year's temperature and precipitation. With a very healthy, wide growth ring is indicating that there were optimal conditions for that tree to grow, and a thin ring might tell you that that tree has been undergoing some stress. So maybe not as much water, maybe it was too hot or too cold during certain parts of the year. So scientists can analyze these rings as a proxy for past temperature or precipitation data. And then when comparing it to local weather records, we can better understand past climate. And so we are using the same methodology that our colleagues at the Lowmont Doherty Earth Observatory Tree Ring Lab at Columbia use. And we are going to put ourselves as dendrochronologists for the day to sample these trees and to better understand what the past climate was like here in Vermont. We're also, as Aisosa was mentioning, we do a climate negotiations role-playing game, which is based off of the International Conference of the Parties that happens every year. Students, they take the role of delegates representing different nations or negotiating blocks, or in some cases, interest groups like the fossil fuel industry. And we have to debate, negotiate, and work together to ultimately try and keep our temperature rise below 2 degrees C or well below 1.5, ideally. This is a really great way for students to understand the challenges that happen in an international negotiation and how to come to some solutions to reach our common goal. So this is a video that kind of shares a little bit about what happens during this session. Let me make sure the sound is shared. Great, so you can see it gets a little bit heated, but the goal is compromise. Next, we take our first off-campus excursion to Lake Bomoseen to do an ecosystem extravaganza. This is one of 3 excursions that we take during the program, and this is going to leverage the local community and environment as a foundation of the curriculum. During this visit, students are going to assess the health of the ecosystem and explore this lake through system science. So they're going to collect these different parameters here, weather in a site sketch, water chemistry, biodiversity, and muck or turbidity or water clarity, and a sediment core. And each one of these have interconnections with each other. For example, if the water chemistry is showing us that there isn't enough oxygen in the water, maybe the temperature is too hot, then we might not have a wide biodiversity of animals. Or if there's a certain type of sediment that we're finding in our sediment core that can indicate what type of life lives in that area. So we're going to create these threads throughout all the parameters to really understand Lake Bomoseen's ecosystem and the health of it. And this is a snapshot into this particular ecosystem. If we're looking at climate changes locally, we have to look at that over a long-term data set of at least 30 years. And so while this is a one-day sampling event, it does contribute toward this larger database that we've been curating over every year of the program. Our second excursion, we take a trip to Montpelier, which is the state house of or the state capital of Vermont. Students are going to learn about local and state climate action as inspiration for their own community level change that they're going to be bringing back home with them. Students engage in small group conversations with government officials and climate leaders, including a state representative, a climate action coordinator. They're going to have the opportunity to take a tour of the State House itself. And then they have a little free time to explore the beautiful town of Montpelier, eat lunch, and have a little bit of free time. Students really enjoyed going to a local bookstore or a thrift shop. Now I'm going to hand it to Sylvie, who will share about our third excursion to Burlington.
Thanks, Laurel. This is one of my favorite days of the program. So in addition to the Montpelier excursion, we visit the city of Burlington in northern Vermont. It's actually bigger than Montpelier, even though Montpelier is our state capital. We designed this day to allow students to get involved directly with the people and organizations that are putting solutions into action here in Vermont. We call this day the Tracks Day. You heard Aisosa mention it before. This is because students have the opportunity to choose between 4 different tracks or focus areas, whichever focus is the most interesting to them. So the focus areas that we offer are biodiversity and conservation, sustainable planning in the built environment, food systems and sustainable agriculture, and climate finance and entrepreneurship. So the group splits up into these 4 tracks in the morning, and each track goes to visit organizations that are working directly with climate solutions in that particular discipline. And at the end of the day, we reconvene as a big group for a beautiful picnic dinner at Bread and Butter Farm, which is a really, really lovely farm nearby. And then we head back to Castleton. So this day is really exciting. We have really wonderful partners who we work with on this day. We actually met with the mayor of Burlington to talk about urban planning and sustainable development in the city of Burlington. We spent an entire day, Aisosa showed pictures of milking cows at Shelburne Farms, learning about sustainable agriculture and the role of, for example, the dairy industry in the climate space. We spent an entire afternoon in a grasslands habitat where researchers are protecting bobolink nesting sites. We actually found some baby bobolink birds. So anyway, we have really incredible partners who we work with for each of these tracks. This is designed to give students as hands-on an experience as possible in careers in different fields of climate action in the state of Vermont. So that's Burlington. It's a really fun day. We're excited for it this summer. In addition to these structured excursions to Montpelier and Burlington, we just get to explore the beautiful Green Mountains in the summertime. It is a really, really, really magical time to be in Vermont, to be outside. Our campus at Castleton is really, really open. It has a lot of green spaces. We try to take advantage of that every single day. We spend a lot of time outside. Aisosa was mentioning Lake Bomazine so much. It is a really wonderful resource that's right next door to us. So we get out there as much as possible. We go berry picking. It's a really wonderful environment to be diving into all of these topics in the summer. So I'll turn it back over to Laurel. Thanks.
Thanks, Sylvie. And I'm going to be quick and send it right over to Aisosa. So students, as we've mentioned a few times now, their final deliverable is to create this climate action plan or project. This is something that you are going to assess your community, understand what the climate challenges that your community faces, and then build a very curated plan to address those challenges. It has to think about the different stakeholders. We want it to be a very tangible project with the goal of bringing it back home. So the work doesn't stop after the 2 weeks of our program. You are going to continue as a leader in your community long after the program's over. And so I want Aisosa to come join us now to share a little bit more about her climate action project and how she was able to develop it and where she is now with it.
Thanks, Laurel. So my climate action plan revolves around 3 things: beating the heat, empowering youth to act, and water conservation / avoiding waterways, specifically in the Bronx because that's where I'm from. So New York City has been experiencing an increase in frequency of extreme temperatures and heat waves, which disproportionately affects lower income communities where means to cool off may not be as accessible, and senior citizens who are more susceptible to heat. A phenomenon that helps explain this is the urban heat island effect, which states that urban communities are more likely to experience higher temperatures than their surrounding rural areas due to low vegetation and heat absorbing materials that these buildings are made out of. These materials like concrete, asphalt, absorb heat during the day and slowly release them at night, causing the surface and air temperatures to increase. So to cool down, people got crafty and they were opening fire hydrants to enjoy the effects of the water, which is always a fun tradition. However, opening these fire hydrants can significantly reduce water pressure and cause potential problems from firefighters. And it wastes about 1,000 gallons of water per minute, flooding and damaging nearby infrastructure. So, to prevent the decrease in water pressure and water waste, spray caps are used to limit and control the amount of water flowing from the hydrants. And while New York City's fire department provides services to install these caps, most people are unaware due to lack of information. Like I personally never knew that what spray caps were and that the fire department could install them for free until I researched it for my climate action project. So my solution is Teen Cool Off. So it would be a summer program for New York City teens who want to combat waterways and learn more about climate change. They will partner with the local fire departments for training and the Bronx River Alliance for weekly lectures. Our focus will be on water conservation, climate change, and community engagement. We want to foster a sense of community, educate teens and residents about climate change and water conservation, and most importantly, save water by adding spray caps to fire hydrants and hosting information sessions about water conservation events in New York's biggest city, Pelham Bay Park. I hope to expand my knowledge and what we learned about climate change to the rest of people. Stakeholders. So stakeholders are people who are interested or have a concern in a certain idea or issue. And our stakeholders would be the Bronx County Fire Department, who will provide teams with the spray caps for the fire hydrants and also train them on how to properly attach them. The Bronx River Alliance, which teaches teens about the effects of climate change and how the Bronx River is impacted. And finally, community members, right? These spray caps will allow them to keep their tradition of opening the fire hydrant to cool down without causing potential problems for the fire department in the future. And you can see in my poster presentation, which basically goes more in depth about what I said and includes like a rough timeline of where I want my climate action project to be. Credit to my sources, of course. And does anyone have any questions about my climate action project?
Thank you so much, Aisosa. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, or we can wait to the end and you can ask directly. The thing I love about this project is that I feel like it's so deeply New York. Like seeing the fire hydrants open in the summer is something that ever since I moved here, I've always seen. And I mean, I guess I never really thought about the damage. I knew it was a lot of water waste, but I think another thing is that if there is a fire, there isn't that water pressure to put it out. So it's a huge safety concern. And so educating people, putting these caps on is just going to be a win-win for all. And it also kind of speaks, I mean, the reason why they're opening them in the first place is because it gets so incredibly hot in the summer because of all that concrete. And so this is this bigger overarching climate challenge that we face in major cities. So I love how local you brought it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Great. I'm going to hand it over to Sylvie for application next steps.
Great. Thank you, Laurel. I will be quick so we can get to the Q&A, but quickly just letting you all know how to apply and what to expect in the application process for the program. So to apply for the Columbia in the Green Mountains program, please visit our website and follow the link on the website. It's a big blue button to fill out an application. The website also includes a detailed description of a lot of what we went over here, a few extra resources, videos that you can take a look at as well. We mentioned this at the beginning, but just a reminder, eligible students are completing 9th through 12th grade, and we also consider motivated rising 9th graders as well. Your application is considered through a selective application process with rolling admissions. So that means that we are reviewing applications until the program fills. There's no hard deadline for that. You are asked to submit a statement of interest. So we want you to tell us why you're interested in joining the program, why you're going to be a positive member of our community, and how you're going to take the information and resources that you get in the program forward. We also ask for 2 teacher references as a part of the application. You will be asked to complete an agreement form and to hold space on the program in the application process. You'll submit a $700 deposit. This is comprised of a $200 application fee and a $500 deposit towards tuition. Full tuition is due on March 15th. And then we encourage you to please reach out to us if you do have any questions throughout this process. We're always here. We're very happy to help. If you go to the next slide, we are also really excited to offer full and partial need-based scholarships to attend the program for students residing in the US. To apply for the scholarship application, we actually do this through a separate application. So if you're interested in the scholarship, you do not need to complete the standard application. You'll do it through the scholarship page on our website. There's a separate application link there. Students should meet the general admission eligibility requirements for age that I just mentioned. The application, as I mentioned, is on a separate page of the website and asks for 2 written responses, as well as those 2 teacher references and financial information for your household, as they are need-based scholarships. This process does have a deadline. Scholarship applications are due on March 15th. We know that's coming up, but there still is time, and we highly encourage all of you to apply if you're interested. Please reach out to us if you need any support in the application process. So that's what to expect for the application process, learning a little bit more about the program on our websites. As always, please reach out to us. We're happy to talk if you do have any other questions.
Thanks, Sylvie. As Sylvie said, we're always ready to answer any questions that you have, whether you have them now or later. You can check out more information on our website. Feel free to reach out to us. The learn@climate.columbia.edu is great if you have any content-related questions. If you have any logistical or administrative questions, feel free to reach out to columbiaclimateschool@goputney.com. Feel free to call Putney about some of those administrative questions, logistical questions as well, or set up a one-on-one appointment with someone from the climate school. I'd be happy to help.